is the reshaping of reality by man to present it in an understandable way. As the artist recreates the world around him, it is shaped by how he sees it and what he believes in. The Indian artist did not attempt to depict only the material reality around him. He wished to share the complete experience of the moment, not just the photographic presentation of the shapes around him. Beauty for the Indian artist has been a reflection of the glory of God. In fact, for the ancient artist, the experience of beauty, the ecstasy on seeing nature or art which is truly beautiful, has been considered as akin to Brahmanand or the final bliss. Join us on this journey into the heart of the Indian tradition of painting. Come with us to the gorge of the Vaghora river, where Ajanta was created, to the courts of the Mughals and the Deccani Sultans. Journey with us through the deserts of Rajasthan and the icy lands of Ladakh and Lahaul Spiti. In the verdant south and in the gentle hills of the north, experience the compassionate view of life that is enshrined in Indian painting.
Iti peso bhagava arahang samma sambuddho vidya charana sampanyo sugato lokavido vanuttaro pure sadamma sarathe Sattha deva manusanang buddho bhagavate buddhang jivita pariyantang saranang gacchami ye cha buddhayate tacha ye cha buddhanagat.
The gorge of the Vaghora river in the Sahyadri hills is an enchanted place. Here two streams met, one of the sophisticated development of the art of painting even at this early date in India, the other filled with the compassionate philosophy of the Buddha.
These streams came together to create a body of painting which has inspired the art of a whole continent. The 31 caves here were created in a magnificent endeavour which was spread out over two phases, the first around the 2nd century BC and the other in the 5th and 6th centuries AD. In the 3rd century BC, the great Buddhist emperor Ashoka sent a religious emissary to Maharashtra. Perhaps taking inspiration from what Ashoka had attempted in the Barabar caves in Bihar, Buddhist monks began to create monasteries and prayer halls in the Sahyadri hills of western India. As many as 800 rock-cut caves were made in western India.
Thus was created a great and enduring tribute to the Buddha and his path. Of all the inspired monuments created by Buddhist monks, the most eloquent was at Ajanta. Here, with hammer and chisel, with paint and brush, the followers of the Buddha created a great monument. Its inscriptions proclaim that it was meant to last forever.
The Buddhist bhikshus were supposed to wander homeless and survive on what alms they collected from door to door. Only in the monsoons, when the rain came down hard, they were to take shelter in caves like these. The early caves at Ajanta are of the Hinayana phase in Buddhism, and the later are of the Mahayana period. The Hinayana Buddhists did not believe in making any figure of the Buddha. Instead, they worshipped symbols of him, such as the stup which you see here. Here, in the Chaitya Cave 10, there is a sense of awe as one looks at these paintings. The paintings in this cave of the 2nd century BC are the oldest surviving paintings of the historical period in India. The headdresses, ornaments and clothes worn by the figures are very similar to those seen in sculptures of this time at Bharati and Sanchi. In the Chaityas 9 and 10, we also see images of the Buddha and later Mahayana paintings. These were made over the earlier murals. The next burst of creative activity at Ajanta began almost 600 years later, in the late 5th century under the Vakatakas. The caves of the glorious second phase of Ajanta were all made during their time. By now, the earlier Hinayan phase of Buddhism had given way to the Mahayana order. The Buddha was no longer represented only by symbols. His statues were being made, and a considerable Buddhist pantheon had been evolved. In Cave 16, many of the paintings have been damaged, but we do see a few scenes from the life of the Buddha. Here is the story of the Buddha's conversion of his half-brother Nanda. Here you see his wife struck by grief because her husband has left her and gone away. This painting is called The Dying Princess. The next great cave to be created at Ajanta was Cave 17. The walls of this cave are covered with many Jatak stories, such as the Vishvantara Jatak you see here. It is the old manner that stories are told to pass on knowledge. The message of the Buddha is enshrined in the happenings of his life and in the stories of his previous births, in the form of different men and animals. In his previous births, he is called a Bodhisattva, a being who is on the path towards enlightenment. These Jatak stories or parables are told to depict the qualities of virtuous living. It is these stories that wreathe the walls of the caves of Ajanta. In the veranda of Cave 17, you see the famous flying Apsara, one of the most sophisticated images at Ajanta. The skilled painter has depicted the jewelry in her turban and her scarf moving with the wind. The Kapi Jatak. Lord Buddha is born as a Bodhisattva monkey. He had saved the life of a hunter who had fallen into a pit. Later, as the monkey sleeps, the man tries to kill him for he is hungry. The Bodhisattva monkey wakes up in time and is scolding the man for being so selfish as to want to kill the very creature who had saved his life. There is no difference in the artist's treatment of men and women and that of the animals. This is a fine and compassionate way of life, which is greatly strengthened by the Buddhist belief that the enlightened one took several previous births in the form of different animals. Lord Buddha has come before his wife Yashodhara and son Rahul. She has tutored the child to ask for his rightful inheritance, being born the son of a king. The Buddha says that he has only his begging bowl to offer. She is bedecked in all her jewelry to entice him to stay back with her. In Cave 1 is one of the masterpieces of Ajanta, the Padmapani, the bearer of the lotus. He brings to us the peace of the spirit. Over his left shoulder are these playful monkeys. Above his right shoulder, we see a joyous celestial musician, this Kinnar. Amid all this activity, the Bodhisattva responds to a deep harmony. He looks within. The Bodhisattva Vajrapani, the bearer of the thunderbolt, brings to us the majesty of the spirit. This deeply thoughtful Bodhisattva wears a glorious crown reflecting the grandeur of divine grace. Here we see the Bodhisattva, King Mahajanak. He hears the sermon of the hermit and loses interest in the material life around him. He begins to look within and loses his attachments to the things of the world. Here he tells his wife Queen Shivali that he is leaving the palace and his kingship to become an ascetic. She is sad that she will be left alone. The palace maids respond in shock and in sadness to the fact that their mistress, the queen, is losing the company of her husband. The queen calls this dancing girl to try to distract the king so that he may not leave the palace and his worldly life. She's beautifully attired as befits the image of a dancing girl in the Chitra Sutra of the Vishnu Dharmotra. And, as the treatise states, her scarves wave with her movement, as do the pearls of the beautiful flautist. Mahajanak is resolute in his decision and rides out upon his horse. He has begun on an inner journey. The inheritance of the tradition, which was received by the painters of Ajanta, has been documented as the Chitra Sutra of the Vishnu Dharmotra Puran. This was a verbal tradition which would have come over many centuries, passed on through guilds of painters and from father to son. It was penned on paper by perhaps the 5th or 6th centuries AD, at the time of the second phase of the great paintings at Ajanta. This ancient treatise places a sophisticated grammar in the hands of the painter. Foreshortening, the rules of perspective, 3 different ways to carry out shading, and literally hundreds of details on how to paint are placed before the artist. He is given a framework of suggestions on how to depict different kinds of people. However, he is informed that rules do not make the painting. Finally, the eyes of the painting have to be opened. It has to be given a life of its own by the painter.
Grammar does not make style. So what these people are doing is that they are internalizing. I think a great many of them knew what the rules were all about, but had the ability and the freedom to go beyond them.
This is a marvelous instance of carrying forward a tradition and yet always calling upon the artist to create work out of his own vision. The narrative flows in these paintings from top to bottom and bottom to top, right to left and left to right. In Indian thought, all time is eternally present. What has been and what is are equally real in themselves, as each of them present a moment of the reflection of the eternal truth. Here we see Asita, the court astrologer, prophesying the birth of the Buddha. And here we see him again, before Queen Mahamaya, who will give birth to the Buddha. Time and place are a part of Maya. The past, present and future are enacted simultaneously and eternally in this perennial drama of the world. The painter's knowledge of perspective is obvious in the receding pillars and in the elliptical mouth of the picture. Volume is depicted by the most beautiful shading, which brings out the roundedness of form in a very sophisticated manner for paintings of such an early date. The concern of the artist, however, was not to depict the photographic reality around. His philosophy told him that the material world around him was a veil. One had to lift that veil and look beyond. So we come across in his work nuances and the feel of the sense of the tangible world. Indeed, we see the beauty of form, the volume and weight, and yet always rising upwards toward something which is more and beyond. It was a great moment in history, when the artist had a blossoming tradition of Indian art and the breath of inspiration in him. These humble painters had a great vision, a vision of humanity and compassion, which moves us and completely enthralls us till today.
The attitude of the artist is not one of struggling against the vicissitudes of life. Instead, it is of surrender. There is no valor, there is no heroism. There is only the search for the still center of the turning world. With all the activity of life, the look is within.
The eyes are windows to the soul, and the Indian painter concentrated immensely on portraying the feelings of his subjects through their eyes. There are 5 kinds of eyes to be painted, which are depicted in the Chitra Sutra. Chapakar, meditative. Matsyodar, female or lovelorn. Uttapal Patrab, placid or peaceful. Padmapatranib, frightened or weeping. And Shankhakriti, angered or deeply pained. The eyes as they were painted at Ajanta became a tradition which spread far and wide. In recent times, Indian painters such as those of the Bengal school, Amrita Shergill and others, were deeply influenced by this manner of painting. These paintings were made by the inheritors of a very long tradition. These were guilds of painters who painted palaces, temples and caves. The art of painting was their legacy, and it was their duty in life to paint, to carry on the visions of a collective understanding which their ancestors had formed, to shape it and to transform it, yet again and always by the sense of their personal experience of life, and yet to continue the thoughts and the traditions which had been created over the ages. As you may imagine, they had no need to write their names upon the paintings. It was a great sense of importance and fulfillment to play one's role as a part of the world, to contribute one's sensibilities and one's brilliance into that eternal fire of creation. The paintings of Ajanta are murals and not frescoes. They are painted on lime-plastered walls which are prepared and dried before the colour is put. The artist got his colours from the simple materials which were available in these hills. For his yellow and red, he used ochre. For black, he used lamp soot. For his white, he used lime. Only for his blue, he used lapis lazuli, which came from Afghanistan. These simple colours were blended and mixed together to provide all the subtle shades which you see here. The Ajanta Caves would have been the most important place of pilgrimage for Indian painters until the caves disappeared from the records sometime in the medieval period. On the 28th of April, 1819, John Smith, a British soldier of the Madras Infantry, chanced upon the caves of Ajanta, and these were discovered for the British rulers. There was an immediate surge of interest. Indian artists were overjoyed to discover the Ajanta paintings. These reflected a marvelous tradition of painting of their forefathers, which had not been known before. Indian art had rediscovered its roots. The creative impulse of Ajanta is seen in other contemporary sites. Fine paintings of the time which are preserved are seen in the caves at Bagh, Pitalkhora and Badami. The Buddhist caves here and in Bhaja, Kanheri, Junnar and in Kerala were all painted profusely. Paintings from the 6th century to the 10th century are found at Ellora. Kailashnath temple at Kanchipuram has the remains of exquisite paintings of the 7th century. The Jain caves at Sitanavasal in Tamil Nadu also have beautiful paintings of the 9th century. The Brihadishwar temple of the 10th century at Tanjavur has another exquisite body of paintings. Thus we see an unbroken tradition of painting in India, which begins here at Ajanta 2,200 years ago. The artistic impulses and traditions which were born here travelled southwards to Sri Lanka, and from there to other countries of Southeast Asia. Simultaneously, the art of Ajanta moved along the trade routes to inspire painters in Afghanistan, Central Asia and China, and from there to Korea and Japan. Ajanta is indeed an enchanted place, where one of the greatest traditions of the art of the world flowered and spread its seeds all over Asia.